They said the child would destroy everything. That was the first whisper that traveled through the stone corridors of power, through the breathless mouths of advisors and soldiers, through the sleepless halls where kings feared the silence more than the noise. A child, they said, a newborn, a threat wrapped in innocence, a prophecy walking on fragile feet. And so before he even drew his first breath, the world had already decided he was dangerous. No one knew his name yet. No one knew that the sound of his cry would one day echo louder than armies. The night he was born did not arrive gently. It came wrapped in cold wind and uneasy skies, the kind of night where even the stars seemed to hold their breath. In a small town that barely mattered to anyone with power, a young woman walked slowly, her body heavy with life and fear. Mary had been traveling for days, her feet swollen, her back aching, her heart carrying a secret that no one around her truly understood. Every step felt like a question without an answer. She had been told not to be afraid, that the child within her was not a mistake, that he was chosen, that heaven had spoken her name. But belief is harder when your body trembles and the world offers no shelter. Joseph walked beside her, silent and watchful. He was not her blood, yet he had chosen her fate as his own. He had wrestled with doubt in the darkness, questioned the impossible, and nearly walked away from a story too heavy for reason. But something had stopped him, a voice in a dream, a peace that made no sense, a command that did not demand but trusted, and so he stayed. When they reached Bethlehem, the doors closed one by one. No room, no space, no mercy. The town was swollen with travelers, but none saw the quiet miracle approaching. Finally, at the edge of the noise, they found shelter where animals slept and warmth came from breath rather than fire. That was where the universe chose to bend. Mary cried out as the night deepened. The air trembled with something ancient, something holy, something unseen. And when the child arrived, there was no thunder, no announcement, no applause. Only a soft cry that cut through the dark like a whisper of light. The world did not stop, but something shifted. Outside the town, shepherds sat with their flocks, men whose names history would never bother to remember. Their lives were shaped by dirt and stars and long nights of watching. And then suddenly, the sky cracked open. Light poured out like a river. Fear seized their bones. And in the glow stood a messenger not of war, but of wonder. "Do not be afraid," the voice said, though their knees shook. "I bring good news that will cause great joy for all people. Today, a Savior has been born, not in a palace, not on a throne, but in a feeding place." The sign was almost insulting in its simplicity. Yet they went, and when they saw him, something inside them broke open. They did not understand how a child so small could carry such weight, but they knew they were standing at the edge of something eternal. Far away, in halls carved from stone and power, another man listened to whispers. King Herod heard of prophecies long buried and now resurfacing. A king born, a ruler promised. His hands tightened around his cup. He had taken his throne with blood and fear, and he would not lose it to a baby. "Find him," he ordered softly, his voice sharp as a blade. "And when you do, tell me." But fear is blind, and power is often deaf to truth. Across deserts and foreign skies, wise men followed a star that refused to be ignored. It moved not like a thing of nature, but like a will, a promise written in light. They carried gifts not fit for a child, yet perfectly suited for destiny. Gold for a king, frankincense for the divine, myrrh for suffering yet to come. When they found him, they did not kneel because tradition demanded it. They knelt because something in their souls recognized something eternal in his gaze. And then they were warned, not by guards or voices of men, but by dreams. They left by another way, carrying with them the unspoken truth that the world had just shifted on its axis. That night, as the child slept, danger crept closer. Joseph dreamed again, a voice urgent, a command sharp with warning. Take the child and flee. No explanation, no comfort, only urgency. By dawn they were gone. Behind them, the land would soon tremble with grief. Cries would rise from homes where hope had just been born and violently taken. Mothers would weep, and the earth would remember their sorrow long after the echoes faded. The cost of fear would stain history. But the child lived. Through deserts and foreign streets, through hunger and exile he grew, not in palaces, but in quiet places, not surrounded by praise, but by ordinary days. He learned to walk, to speak, to listen. He learned the weight of human hands and the sound of laughter. He learned pain, scraped knees, long days, and obedience. And all the while, something within him waited. Time moved, as it always does, indifferent and relentless. Empires shifted. Kings rose and fell. Prophecies aged like sealed letters waiting to be opened. When the moment came, it did not announce itself with fire. It came like a whisper in the wilderness. A man stood in the river, calling people to turn their hearts back to God. And one day, among the crowd, stood the one who had once been wrapped in cloth and laid in a feeding trough. No crown, no army, just a quiet authority that bent the air around him. When he stepped into the water, heaven responded. The sky opened, a voice spoke, and everything that had been hidden was suddenly declared. This was the beginning of the end, and the end of the beginning, because the child who had been hunted would one day stand before rulers who thought they held power, and he would not resist them. He would let their fear play out. He would let love be misunderstood. He would let sacrifice speak louder than force. And the world would never be the same. But the story does not end there, because the question still lingers, trembling in the silence between heartbeats. If a child born in a place of rejection could change the destiny of humanity, what does that mean for those still waiting in the dark? And what happens when the one born to save the world chooses not to save himself? For those still waiting in the dark, it means they are not forgotten, even when the silence feels endless. The darkness was never proof of absence. It was a place where hope was being formed quietly, patiently, where faith learned to breathe without sight. The waiting was not punishment. It was preparation, because the light that came into the world did not arrive to erase struggle instantly, but to walk through it with humanity, to show that even in the deepest night, love could still take root and grow. And when the one born to save the world chose not to save himself, it was not weakness. It was a final, devastating act of love. He refused to step down because saving himself would have meant abandoning everyone else. He chose suffering so that suffering would no longer have the final word. He chose silence so that the broken could finally be heard. He chose the cross not as defeat, but as a doorway, the place where fear lost its authority and death lost its claim. In that moment, the world learned something it had never understood before. True power does not come from escaping pain, but from enduring it for the sake of others. Salvation did not arrive with force or spectacle, but with surrender. Love stayed when it had every reason to flee. And when the stone was rolled away, it wasn't just a tomb that opened. It was the future. So for those still waiting in the dark, the message is this. The darkness is not the end of the story. It is the place where faith learns to breathe. The waiting is not wasted. The silence is not empty. And the one who once lay in a manger and later in a tomb has already walked ahead, lighting the path forward. The story does not end with death. It ends with hope, unbreakable, unearned, and alive. And the question left behind is no longer whether light will come, but whether we will recognize it when it does.